Welcome everybody to another episode of Howling with the Wolfe. I'm Cameron Wolfe. This is a very different week, from what we normally do, and I'm excited to talk about what the action is. I think the biggest topic of the week is what I want to spend the most time for. I know for Dolphins fans, you want to get your Dolphins goods, and we're going to talk some Dolphins, but I really want to discuss this Colin Kaepernick workout, and we'll spend some time discussing what this NFL workout Saturday that Colin Kaepernick will have outside of Atlanta. The NFL set this up, and what it means for his chances to get back in the league, what it means for teams who are going to be there, and just sort of the ramifications of this all, intentions behind it, and I'll kind of share my thoughts as well as some thoughts that I've heard from people across the league, and then we'll go ahead and move over to the Dolphins side of the realm and talk about rat poison. Nick Saban made this term popular, a couple years ago after beating Texas A&M, just sort of the outside noise becoming too much that it poisons his team. And Brian Flores has said multiple times this week that he's worried about players feeling themselves a little bit after a two-game winning streak. So I want to discuss that with the Buffalo Bills coming into town this week, and the Dolphins having a chance to go to a three-game winning streak. First things first, let's jump into the action. Colin Kaepernick. If you guys who follow me here before, you know my stance on this, and for those who don't, you'll hear it again. I think that Colin Kaepernick deserves to be in the NFL. I know there's a lot of different views about the way he went about his peaceful protests. What his talent level is, whether he wants to play the game, everybody from different spectrums. But for me, Colin Kaepernick deserves to be in the league, and I think that this is good for the NFL, who I think has played a role in, whether it's the NFL owners or whether it's the league office, not allowing him to join the league after his peaceful protest in 2016. So I think that, my first thought when I first heard this news came out Tuesday afternoon, and I actually was out in Gainesville, Florida, at the University of Florida, speaking at a town hall for the undefeated. Funny enough, about social justice and football, and the topic came up for Colin Kaepernick right as the news broke, and I was able to talk and kind of give my opinion on it. But the first thing I thought when I heard this news was, I hope it's not just a PR stunt. I really hope that this is meaningful and that it isn't just done so that the NFL looks in a strong light and it looks like they've done something to try to get him back, and the rest is on him. Because I've seen some of the ways the league is going about some of these things, and from time to time they can be, a little bit self-serving, whether it's the NFL owners or whether it's, the NFL league office, and from their perspective, the best way to kind of make this Colin Kaepernick situation go away is to say, hey, we gave him a chance to prove his worth. We had teams come out and see him, and he wasn't good enough. And I hope that it's not the case, and I hope that he really gets a true chance. So that was my initial reaction. And then as information started to come out about when the meeting was coming out, why it was coming out so quickly, it sounds like they brought it up to Kaepernick and said Tuesday that you have to make a decision this day on whether you want the meeting, and the meeting has to be Saturday in Atlanta. It didn't allow for any flexibility, which really made me raise an eyebrow. It sounds like they initially either agreed to or led Colin Kaepernick's camp to believe that they would provide a list of teams and personnel executives that would be able to essentially attend this meeting, and so he would know who he would be performing in front of. And then they've said recently that they're not going to do that. And, a lot of that kind of rubs me the wrong way. I had skepticism going into it, and now I'm just like, is this all a show? Does he really have a real chance? And, Eric Reid this week, Carolina Panthers safety, Malcolm Jenkins, Philadelphia Eagles safety, all said this week that I'm afraid it's like a PR stunt, and I've covered some of these guys who have been through this movement, whether it's Kenny Stills, who's now in Houston, Brandon Marshall, who plays for Oakland, who used to cover in Denver. And, the biggest thing that you always see from people who maybe don't understand your stance is they want to make it go away. Whether it's kneeling, whether it's the idea of you being a martyr, they try to make things go away. So I hope that this isn't the case. Like, Cap hasn't been in the league for 3 years. I'm not naive to think that he's going to come out there and look like a top 15 starting quarterback, but I know that nobody in their right mind should think that, hey, he's not one of the top 64 quarterbacks in the league and deserves to be at least a backup on somebody's roster. And I think he could play and compete for a team like Chicago. I think he might be better than Mr. Trubisky. I think he could compete for a team like Pittsburgh, who had Big Ben out, who's going to play tonight. I think he might help a team more than Mason Rudolph. But that's just my thoughts. So, media aren't allowed to attend, or else I would try to make my way to Atlanta this weekend and try to do everything, I could to be there. But, some of the teams that mentioned, some of the teams have already decided that they're going to send somebody there. And I think that, the Miami Dolphins are one of them. So I think from my perspective covering this team, I'm eager to see exactly how they go about it. And, Brian Flores had mentioned that he thinks that Cap was a very good player in this league, and he's eager to see how he looks after 3 seasons. I'd love for Cap to be here in Miami. I'm not going to hold my breath given the situation, but, that's a possibility. I know New England was on that list, Detroit. I believe that there was a few other teams that were all listed as possibilities there. So, I think that, I think the ball is really in these teams' hands, and I hope that they don't just send their low-level pro scout. That's one thing that I'm going to be watching. Who do they send? Is it going to be the GM? Is it going to be the head coach? I know Kaepernick will love high-ranking executives to be there, but it's a Saturday on day before games. Saturdays are often when GMs and head coaches, well, particularly GMs and high-level executives, visit college games, and head coaches often are prepping their team either on the road, traveling to a road opponent, or prepping their team for the game ahead. So I don't expect many, if any, head coaches there. And, I expect very few GMs there, if any. So I'm thinking it will be a lot of pro scouts. And do those guys have decision-making power to really make a move? Or is this just a dog and pony show and Kaepernick goes unsigned? So skeptical is how you would describe how I am. I'm hopeful that I'm wrong, and I'm hopeful that this really sets up a job for Kaepernick. But, show me. Show me is how I'm feeling. So let me answer a few of you guys' questions. I see you guys have some questions, whether here on Facebook Live or on Periscope or Twitter. So I'm going to answer a few of you guys' questions. Luis Velasquez says, you think any chance Cap doesn't show up for this workout? It just seems teams suspect on NFL. I don't know if I would trust him if I were him. That's an interesting topic because I was talking to this with someone last night, somebody involved with the NFL. I feel like it's a lose-lose situation for Kaepernick because if he decides not to show up, which if he doesn't get a list of the people who's going to attend, if he feels like it's going to be a dog and pony show and it doesn't benefit him, then if he decides not to come, then the NFL and people who don't want him back in the league are going to immediately say that Kaepernick had a chance, the NFL provided Kaepernick with a chance, and he decided that he didn't want to play football anymore. So he decided that, this is all a show. He doesn't really want to play. He doesn't really want to get back in the league. And that will be the narrative going forward. And he may have thrown away his last chance to get back in the league. So from that perspective, it's not really any positives from him not showing up and taking a workout. Like, he's been trying to get a workout with teams for 3 years. So the fact that he's getting 11 teams and possibly more there, even if it's just a pro scout, is more than he's got. So it's progress. That being said, if he does show up to the workout and none of these teams really have any intention in signing him, and he doesn't get signed, then the narrative goes out that you aren't good enough. You're washed. You haven't played in 3 years. You aren't good enough to be a quarterback in the league, and that's why you're not in the league, so go away. So I think it's a lose-lose situation for Cap, but if he doesn't show up, I think that's the more dangerous scenario. I think for him, he's got to show up and hope that there's a few people, a few teams out there that are going to, due diligence and ultimately really judge him for how he's playing and possibly give him a chance in the league, whether it's this year or next season. So that's his best hope, and I hope there's a team out there that gives him a shot. Let's see what we got here. Rob Espin says, I have no problem signing Cap, but it wouldn't make sense for us. The Bears and Panthers make sense. Dolphins Daddy 30 says, I think Cap is better than half the quarterbacks in the league. I think Jay-Z has something to do with this. PR stunt, Pony Show. I hope this is legit. Some of you guys have similar thoughts. I do want to talk about the Jay-Z element for a little bit, simply because, if you guys remember, especially guys who follow the Dolphins, Kenny Stills was very unhappy with the way Jay-Z, and he wasn't the only one. Colin Kaepernick wasn't. Eric Reed wasn't. We're unhappy with the way that Jay-Z handled this new social justice partnership he has with the NFL. So as part of this social justice partnership, the idea was that Jay-Z is going to come about and be able to create change in the communities, be able to create change in NFL circles, and ultimately help do things that the league hasn't been able to do in these black communities. So a lot of players were really skeptical and saw it as a money grab. So the fact that Jay-Z's name came in here is interesting because now it becomes is this Jay-Z's plan going into work, or is this, like we talked about, just another pony show where the league is using maybe that name recognition to make this look propped up? So I don't know for sure. I do say that, I'm skeptical as a whole, but I'm not going to completely dismiss it because I think everything deserves at least a wait and see period. So I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to wait and see, what action Jay-Z can do throughout this partnership, even though I'm skeptical of that. I'm going to wait and see what the NFL and their teams do in this Colin Kaepernick workout because I'm skeptical of that. But all we can do is wait and see. So that's what I'm willing to do. But I'm just telling you guys what my opinion was and what my thoughts are and what I talked to for, a couple players and a couple executives in the league when I first heard this news. So my thought is that it will be mostly scouts there. I think most teams will end up sending a representative, more than half. I think even more than 11 that have announced. But I don't think there will be any huge names that you see there as far as GMs or head coaches, more than, 2 or 3 guys. So I think that, that element is going to make it interesting about, is it a real shot? Is it a real shot for Cap to get back in the league? I don't understand the hate from fans. They act like he's a criminal or some common woman beater. Yeah, I think we've talked about this point, and we don't have to labor it a little bit, but the fact that, Kaepernick is having a peaceful protest, and there's an interview portion of this session that I'm sure one of the main questions that they'll ask is, do you intend to continue to kneel for the anthem? Okay. How do you intend to deal with the backlash that we'll get as a team if we sign you? Those are 2 questions that are going to be answered, and they're going to want a really good answer from Cap on how he does that. I don't know if a team will mandate that he stands to be signed, and I don't know if a team's going to want him to hold some of the responsibility for that backlash. But I know for sure if there's a way, they're going to answer. They're going to get those questions answered, and that's going to have an influence on whether they sign Cap. It's not just going to be all on the field. It's never been about just on the field. So I don't think 3 years later that it all of a sudden becomes about what Cap can do on the field. Miami Alondra says, all depends on what Cap wants. Does he want to be a starter? How much money does he want for that? I think this is a really interesting kind of perception that a lot of people have. Here are the facts that I know. I don't think there's been a situation where Colin Kaepernick has been offered a contract and he turned it down based on money. I know there was one situation when he was under contract with the San Francisco 49ers where he had already had about $13 or $14 million guaranteed in the final year of his deal, and Denver was attempting to trade for him. John Elway and Denver were trying to trade for him, but they wanted him to take a contract deduction from $14 million around that to about $7 million. And this was money that he already had guaranteed, so it was for sure in his pocket, and he said no. I think if your salary is $14 million and you're going to get that regardless, and somebody says, hey, I'll trade you here, but you got to take $7 million less, I think any reasonable person would say no. Other than that, I don't think there's been a situation where Cap said, hey, I know there's been rumors, hey, he wants $15 million, $20 million. I don't think any of that has been proven accurate other than just being rumors. So I don't think there's any indication that Cap wants more than a traditional backup quarterback would want coming into the league. That being said, if that is a hindrance, then yeah, that could be understandable. But I don't think there's any reason that we should assume or we should just kind of make that jump that he's not in the league because he wants a certain amount of pay. His agents have vehemently disagree with that. And they said he's never been offered a contract. Nonetheless, worked out for many teams. So I think we go from that and say that, hey, there isn't any demands from his part to get a job in this league. Mess Williams says Atlanta, Cleveland, Miami, or Tampa would be a good fit. Atlanta's got Matt Ryan there, but I think any team, he's better than nearly every backup in the league. So Cleveland, we hear a lot about fit. Him in that system with Freddie Kitchens behind Baker Mayfield competing with him, great fit. Miami fits. He would. There's an argument to be made. He's as good or better than every quarterback on Miami's roster. And he can at least compete for that role. The Miami's in a unique situation because obviously they're going to draft their quarterback in the future in 2020. But to have him in that room, Kaepernick, it doesn't hurt Miami at all. And in Tampa, Jameis Winston is there, but is he for real the answer? Bruce Arians is one of the most creative and open coaches in the league, and I think he would be a great fit for Colin Kaepernick. So, I think any of those teams you mentioned would be somewhere where I think Colin Kaepernick could thrive. Dolphins Daddy said last time I checked, he took his team to the Super Bowl. That is correct. Let's see. No problem. I'll answer a couple of these and I'll move on. I know some of you guys want to hear some Dolphins related content, and I have some good stuff that I want to talk to you on that front. Two more cap questions, and we'll go ahead and shift the conversation. Miami Alondro is asking from the Miami perspective, how do you think the whole Cap and Castro deal will affect the decision and go well in Miami, and how will it go well with season ticket sales? And then Dolphins Daddy says, does this affect the Dolphins' future plans if they sign Cap? I'd still draft a quarterback. So I talked a little bit about the second question, but I'll touch on that quickly again. But for the first question, I think there are certain markets that, you would have issues, at least initial issues with your fan base, your sponsors, because of, whether it's Colin Kaepernick, and I think the Castro thing was a misstep. I'm not going to be, beat around the bush there. I think that, he shouldn't have said that. I think that he would regret it if someone asked him about it. That being said, that I think that his overall message to want equality in this world, to want being treated equally, is something that rings true. I do think that Miami would have a hard time dealing with his seemingly support of Castro at that point, and I think that would be a tough hurdle for him to overcome in this market. But let's not pretend that other quarterbacks have not made missteps, and in particular, been able to thrive and continue going forward. So, I'm not sure exactly if that's something that could be mended, but I do think that he's made mistakes just like other players, and I don't think that condemns who he is and what he's fighting for. So that's my thought on that. But it is a good point. And as far as season ticket holders, if season ticket holders are sticking with the Dolphins through this season on the field, and I'm not sure that that Colin Kaepernick would be the move that took them all the way overboard. And then just briefly on the topic about would they still draft a quarterback if he was signed in Miami? I think absolutely. I think the Colin Kaepernick move would be one to see short term what he can provide for your team, what talent is. If this is a team that's really looking to bring in talent any chance they can, which is what Brian Flores and Chris Greer have said it repeatedly. If that's the case, then you got a chance to bring in a potentially talented quarterback. You want to make that move. So I don't know if it would be a move for 2019 or if it'd be a move for 2020. Either way, bringing a talent in that room wouldn't, in my opinion, dissuade them from drafting a quarterback. Colin Kaepernick's 32. He's probably not anybody's long-term franchise quarterback answer at this point of his career, but he can help some teams. I think the Dolphins drafting a quarterback in 2020 no matter what, but it shouldn't dissuade them from taking a look at Cap. Let's go ahead and jump to the Dolphins, and I have a couple other NFL thoughts as a whole, not about Kaepernick, but as a whole I want to discuss, including Ryan Tannehill. I have a question about Ryan Tannehill that I want to get to. But first, rat poison. People got a chuckle this week when Brian Flores said he actually said it last week. He hinted to it, and then again this week that he's worried about his guys getting overconfident. And he's like, we have been, they built this team, they built this, the way they're starting to build this culture and what they perceive as a winning culture moving forward has been built on the back of nobody respects us. We're going to band together. It's us against the world. Nobody outside of this locker room matters. And you hear that cliche cross sports all the time. But now that they started winning, especially some of these guys who probably wouldn't be in the league or wouldn't be on an NFL roster if it wasn't for the Dolphins, are starting to play well. They're starting to get some accolades. And as natural, they're starting to feel themselves a little bit. And Brian Flores said this week, talking about social media, it's like social media, people looking at that and getting their focus on that is going to take away from what we're trying to do. And you could tell he's worried about that. And, we talked about Nick Needham this week, undrafted cornerback who had a brilliant game. It was arguably the hero that helped them beat the Colts last week. And, asked about him in a press conference today, and he said I hope that he's not feeling himself too much. I hope he's not, really getting in a position where, he's taking his focus off the film. He's taking his focus off everything else. And I got a question here, and I'll address it. I'll address it briefly from who Matt Jones about the end of the press conference. But Brian Flores is a very intense coach, and I think there was a situation there that's kind of going around social media where one of the reporters from Sun Sentinel, Safedin, had chuckled at a comment that he said that these players may feel like they're superstars based off the what's going on the field, the credit they're getting, and maybe they are a superstar, but they got to get their focus on the film. And Nick Needham, superstar, that's not something that you naturally hear, especially at the start of his career. So he chuckled about it, and Flo was not happy. Flo was not happy about that at all, and he, in my opinion, tried to make an example out of Safed. So I wasn't a huge fan of the interaction. I know that that they personally have talked about it, and I don't think it's worth more than a day issue, but I know that a lot of people got to chuckle over it on social media based on that. But I think ultimately the point that I was trying to make with this is that, you look at it, we don't think any time at the start of the season we're going to think that the Dolphins were worried about being overconfident or were worried about, feeling themselves or getting this rat poison. But they're at a different level. And I saw one comment earlier on this Periscope lab. They may win too many games. They're that conversation. We talked about that last week. We're going to take a break a little bit from it this week on Draft Talk. But they're in a position now where they're very much in danger of not picking in the top 3. Maybe not picking in the top 5 if they win another game. And it makes okay, what does this mean to our plan? What does this mean for what we were striving to be? So I think from a coaching perspective, it shows that Brian Flores can maximize his talent. It shows that what he's going to be as a coach is going to be really demanding. He's not going to let his foot off the gas. And he really doesn't want guys to start sniffing themselves and bite on the rat poison, whether it's from the media, whether it's from all the love and congratulations they're getting outside. And I think that's a really interesting aspect of him as a coach that we didn't get to see when they were 0-7 because nobody was praising them. It was all negative. But now that there's some positive feeding in, he doesn't like that. He don't like guys getting lathered in praise. He doesn't like all that attention because he feels like that takes away from the focus of what you're trying to do. So I thought that was really interesting aspect of his talk today and just sort of his demeanor this week. They're playing Buffalo, a team they've already played. And, I think that, I'm really eager to see after 2 straight wins, do they have that same fire? Do they have that same energy? And do they win 3 in a row? The odds makers are starting to respect them. I think they were 17-point underdogs or 14-point underdogs. I think it was 17 points against Buffalo last 3 weeks ago in Buffalo. And now they're 6.5-point underdogs. So that swung 10 points in a matter of 3 weeks. So respect's been given to the Dolphins. How do they handle it? Can they play the same way with respect as they did it with disrespect? I think that's something to watch for this team, and that might be more interesting over the next few weeks than where they are in the draft pick rankings. So that's my thoughts on that. I do want to answer a quick question on Ryan Tannehill, and then I'm going ahead and wrap this up, barring any final questions. Let everybody get to the Thursday night football game. But Luis Velasquez, and I appreciate you. I know you've been following me since Tennessee days. And I always try to get your questions in as much as I can because of that. What's up? Huh? I can't hear you. Sorry, that's my wife. Um, Luis Velasquez saying, should I expect the Tannehill that the Titans have seen the past 4 games to last for the rest of the season? And if so, do you think that they should re-sign him? I think that Ryan Tannehill has always had these spurts, and this is what I would warn Titans fans who are watching Ryan Tannehill right now. The worry that Dolphins fans had over the cycle is that what is the peak of Ryan Tannehill? What ultimately is he? Is he your franchise quarterback? He always left Dolphins fans wanting more. I think the misconception is that Ryan Tannehill wasn't a good quarterback, and I think that that was never the case. I think that he was always a solid quarterback, and I think that for him, it was, did he do enough to take his team to the next level? That being said, that he's looked great in Tennessee, and I hope he leads them to a playoff berth. I hope he gets a new contract there because I think he's a good fit in Nashville. He and his family are. I think he's a good fit in Tennessee. But I think that, he's got to be on a team that's got to, in my opinion, strong offensive line, strong running game, strong defense. If all those pieces are around him, then Ryan Tannehill is going to look good. If those pieces around him start to separate, what we saw like in Miami last year, offensive line goes into shambles, your receivers start to leave away, your running game starts to leave away, and I think that that's when you start to see some of the flaws of Ryan Tannehill. So I think if you're a team like Tennessee that has a really strong running game with Derrick Henry, has a really, what I think is a really good defense, and I think the offensive line's been up and down, but they have the potential to be a really good offensive line, then I think that's a really good fit for Ryan Tannehill. And I think that, they should re-sign him at this point. I think the Marcus Mariota era is over in Tennessee. They're not going to be good enough to get a top quarterback in the draft. So I think the best method is to look at free agency. And, are they going to want to shell out $25, $30 million a year for Cam Newton? Are they going to want to go get an Andy Dalton? Are any of these quarterbacks definitively better than what they have in Ryan Tannehill? I'm not sure. So I think for them, Ryan Tannehill may be the best option. And we'll see how that fits for them going forward. So I think that's about it. Lewis, if you don't mind, send me a DM. I mentioned you earlier. You've been following me since the beginning. I'm gonna send a DM. Send me a DM. I'm gonna send you some to show you some love for supporting me for so long. For everybody else, I appreciate you guys as always for tuning in. We're gonna do this again every week. Share and join me back here same time next week.